Okay, sorry about that. So welcome everybody. As Raj said, my name is Jamie Tillman. I graduated in 2003, majored in psychology and communication, and I am currently on the alum board, on the Resources Development Committee, and I'm the current chair.
Speckman, class of 72, and always a pleasure to be with you. I'm on the RDC committee with, if you want to call it a specialization in reunion. This has kind of been my lifeblood for a period of time now. I've been on the board, the alumni board, for about, I suppose, 5 or 6 years. I ended up being a sociology major after changing my major 6 times at St. John's. I did that all within 4 years, which could be a record from what I was told. Either that or they just let me out with a degree, which was kind of a nice thought too. And I was a class chair along with Steve Setzler. We were class chairs a long time ago for about 20 years. Then I kind of backed away from my activity at St. John's and then rejoined the group and the board. And I just think the world of this reunion program. I was opposed to it when we began. And after studying it and getting involved with it, now it's kind of like the best damn thing I've ever seen.
Thanks, Rick. And I'm Bill Olson, class of 1991. I chair the Resource Development Committee on the Alumni Board, and am proud to be a part of this tonight. I grew up in suburban Chicago, came to St. John's, stayed, married a Benny. I am in the technology field, but I too am a psychology major, biology minor. And I'm passionate about reunion, but also the student fund, which we'll get a chance to talk about in a little bit. Back to you, Rick.
Great, thanks, Bill. And I do need to clarify one thing. RDC stands for the Resource Development Committee, not the Republican Democrat Committee, in case anybody's confused on that. Tonight we're going to, obviously we've started with the volunteer roles and expectations. We'll continue through that dialogue. At 7:25, we're going to go to the Reunion 2020 overview. And then at 7:45, we have a great panel of people who've had just wonderful experiences with the reunion. They're going to share some of their thoughts with you. Once again, as many of you know, this is the first time we're coming back to groups of the reunion classes that have already experienced it one time before. I think you'll really enjoy many of the changes and adaptations that have been made and how this thing has progressed. Then at 8:30, we're going to talk about the fundraiser training. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie and Bill. And for one of the few times in my life, I'm going to mute.
Thank you, Rick. All right, well, I'm going to get this kicked off by just talking through some of the expectations and really just the joint venture of St. Ben's and St. John's together. So as we all know, St. Ben's and St. John's are 2 separate institutions, and we have the opportunity to represent all 3 brands, and the brands being the St. Ben's brand, the St. John's brand, and then the joint brand together. Reunion is strategically planned to honor all 3 brands with some joint programming. Some St. Ben's only programming and some St. John's only programming. So when we go through the schedule, you're going to notice all 3 of those brands being represented. The expectation for classes, who are desiring to work together is that there's equity in the work and in the planning. It must be a joint conversation with both Bennies and Johnnies at the table when making decisions. So just a reminder that, we don't want to be making decisions in isolation. This is really a collaborative effort amongst Bennies and Johnnies both. So just, trust one another and just make sure that we're everybody's inclusive of everyone making decisions. Please note that because St. Ben's and St. John's are separate institutions, they have different systems, processes, and staff structures. So your class is going to be assigned a staff liaison. We're going to have one for St. Ben's and one for St. John's. And they'll provide a class list as requested and be your point of contact during your reunion year. They do not share gift information across the 2 colleges, but they do share contact information for alums to the volunteers. So the same is true for volunteers. You're not going to see each other's gift amounts to the other college, but the contact information is going to be shared. So we're actually going to ask that each of you digitally sign the confidentiality agreement. And you're going to be receiving this at your first in-person class committee meeting from your staff liaison. And again, this is just to ensure the confidentiality of your classmates and the respectful use of their personal information throughout the entire reunion cycle. It does state that information you receive is only to be used for the college's purposes. So just a heads up on that. As you work in your groups, let's just keep the goal of reunion in mind, which is to engage Bennies and Johnnies with each other and Bennies and Johnnies with the institution. So, you know, they can have gatherings at any time, but this is the only time that they get access to both campuses for an entire weekend. And that's really the distinction here, is that we're bringing classmates together, and we're bringing classmates together with the institution. And then just, you know, a quick note too, that not all volunteers are able to attend the Zoom session tonight. So we would just ask that you follow up with other volunteers that may have missed this to get everybody up to speed. So that's all I had on just the joint venture, the joint nature of this. I'm going to pass it on to Bill now to talk about roles.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that. So I do want to talk about roles as volunteers, because our role is very important. And as volunteers, really our focus is to help drive the reunion attendance and the class scholarship fundraising results. We do this through call nights, email, and snail mail communication, social media, and most of all, our personal outreach. It is our role to assist St. Ben's and St. John's in marketing this opportunity of reunion and spreading the message as ambassadors. And truly, we're the only ones who can create real peer momentum. When we begin meeting with our fellow class volunteers, we will invest time devising strategies to effectively reach our classmates in a very personal and relevant way. This will vary by class based on one's generation, life stage, the social groups to which we belong, and memories from one's time as a student. It's up to groups, it's up to us as volunteers to plan and execute on this outreach. To help empower us with our outreach, a social media toolkit within each of our respective base camp sites will be available for our use. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. We encourage you to use these tools and suggestions. They are great resources and helpful in generating ideas and approaches as we engage with our classmates. To prime the classmates for this outreach, St. Ben's and St. John's will very soon be sending a save the date postcard with the dates for the reunion to everyone in our respective classes. St. Ben's and St. John's will also mail a print invitation to reunion this winter. These are the only two pieces of print media the colleges will send about reunion. St. Ben's and St. John's will also send mass emails to our classes and provide the website and schedule for registration when it opens in March. Here's the good news. We don't need to worry about building the infrastructure that's already done for us. So we can focus on building excitement towards getting people there this summer. And that's up to us. For each of the past 5 years, reunion attendees were surveyed. We've learned the channel of communication which influenced Benny's and Johnny's most to attend reunion and to make a gift was a personal call, a text, or an email invitation from a classmate. The #1 reason people decide to attend is because they know that their friends are going to be there on campus.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's this peer-to-peer outreach which is the essential element in a successful reunion, and that's our role. So you might ask, how do we do it? Well, there are several proven approaches to class volunteer outreach. There's class segmentation, subgroup identification and recruitment, and class list assignments. By using these approaches, we can more effectively spread the work to other volunteers. We'll talk more about these approaches when we get to our panel discussion a bit later. Events for reunion are planned by the CSB and SJU staff. class volunteers shouldn't feel the need to plan additional events. But if your class desires to have a class or a subgroup specific event within reunion, it's encouraged to use an existing event as the meetup rather than instituting a wholly separate event.
Mm-hmm.
If your class must have a specific event outside the existing schedule, there are some ground rules, and I want to go through those now. First, the volunteers are responsible for the cost of planning one of those events. St. Ben's and St. John's will list the event on the reunion schedule, but only if it does not overlap with another official reunion event. The official reunion events are intended to connect alum directly with the colleges. St. Ben's and St. John's prefers any class-specific events happen on campus. So staff will give volunteers direct contact information for the CSB or SJU events offices in order to reserve spaces for that purpose. Now a little bit of what I call a safe harbor, or maybe an additional disclaimer, which is St. Ben's and St. John's are not responsible for the activity of alum at class-specific events which happen off campus. Agreeing to list an event on the reunion schedule does not constitute responsibility on the part of either St. Ben's or St. John's. Ultimately, our time is way better spent getting our classmates excited about attending reunion and giving support to our class than it is doing other event planning. Jamie, with that, I'll turn back to you and ask for you to talk us through what reunion weekend might look like.
Okay, great, thank you. So just to
sessions in the comments so far tonight, and briefly for everyone's information, Alum College is an opportunity to learn in a little mini class setting. They take place on both campuses throughout the reunion weekend, and they are little mini classes hosted by faculty, by alums of special note or who have a special talent, gift, or academic area to share. And it's a way to satisfy lifelong learning. So we've put up on the screen for you some examples of the Alum College sessions that were hosted last year. So you can do everything from exploring kind of current reading trends to walking the campuses with people who understand the history and the renovations of all the buildings, touring the St. John's Bible Gallery, learning about current events from a historical lens, as in Ken Jones's Removing a President session. So there's a ton of great learning opportunities and a way to engage through Alum College sessions.
Thanks, Val. Great, okay, and then just going over some of the big elements for the schedule. So on Friday, there's going to be a memorial service at St. John's, and then Friday is also the launch event with some food and music at St. John's. Saturday is the kickoff events at both campuses. Saturday there's a picnic at St. Ben's, and there's a beach bash at St. John's. And then Saturday is the St. Ben's Gala Dinner and the St. John's class dinners. And then Sunday there's Mass at both St. Ben's and St. John's. So that's kind of the overall agenda. And then what's new, let's see here. I'm trying to look at the screen and my notes at the same time here. Are there any call outs, Val, that you want to call out that would be new for outside of what's listed on here? Did I get everything?
I think you did, yeah. I think the thing that this cohort, the 0s and the 5s, would not have experienced the first time around was the joint memorial service. Okay. And so that's a very special event that will take place on Friday, late afternoon, early evening, right before dinner on the SJU campus.
Wonderful, okay, thank you. All right, and then in terms of cost of housing and meals, there is no registration fee. Housing is $75 per bed for the whole weekend, so that's a really great deal. Meals range from $15 to $38 each, depending on the location and the setup. Reunion prices cover name badges, water bottles, tents, golf carts, signage, and other costs. And then day of and pre-registered prices are the same. There will be a link bus schedule and transportation. So there's a bus, the link bus will go back and forth between the two campuses. As we all know, it's called the link. The bus runs every hour during the day, and the final bus is at 2 a.m. So you have plenty of time to have lots of fun. There's going to be an app for the schedule and for photos during the weekend throughout the time on campus. You can download the app to your phone now for Reunion 2019, and it will auto-update for the Reunion 2020 next year. Are there any call-outs for that application, Val? In terms of like type of phone, or is it just Reunion 2019?
Yes, if you search, I think you can search CSB SJU Reunion or just Reunion 2019 in either your App Store or in the Android version of the App Store, which I'm not familiar with, but I know it's there. The Reunion app should pop right up. It looks very similar to the Reunion Sunburst logo that you see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen on the slides. And so if you see that app, then you know that you found the CSB SJU Reunion app. We are currently building the 2020 app, so what you see there will be last reunion's content, but it would be fun for you to explore that. And we do recommend that you go ahead and download it now to learn how to use it.
Okay, great, thank you. Registration will open in February of 2020. So we are going to just ask that you build a plan starting today for how you're going to do the save the dates and fundraising work this fall, and then another round of outreach to get folks to actually register in the spring. And we're going to ask that you all register for Reunion a week early so that your names and those of the other volunteers you recruit are already populating the attendee lists before your classmates actually see that registration page. The biggest obstacle to getting your classmates who said they're planning to come to actually register is having them think through which meals and housing details pertain to them. If they've decided what day they will arrive, where they will sleep, and who their roommates will be before February, your class will end up with a larger turnout at Reunion and a larger class gift. So it's all about planning. Plan, plan, plan. As a reminder, your time is better spent getting classmates excited about attending Reunion and giving gifts and participating in the fun activities already on the Reunion schedule. Any questions about the weekend, any of the information that we just went through, the agenda?
Please remember to unmute yourselves if you do have questions so we can hear you.
And this is a good informal time for the spoken voice questions. We have about 15 minutes until our panelists join us. So there is plenty of time for you to ask any questions that you have or that you would like to ask about Reunion 2020.
I tried to ask a chat question, but apparently my laptop refused. I had a question about that on Saturday. I mentioned something about SJU class dinners together. What does that mean?
Mike, this is Raj from St. John's Institutional Advancement. I'm happy to take that question. So in the past 5 years of summer reunion, St. John's has held class dinners in tents on the tundra or in individual rooms in the quad, while St. Ben's was having its gala dinner at Goretzky at St. Ben's.
Right.
And so what we have decided to do this year is to actually combine those class dinners into one shared meal. We haven't determined the location yet, but it may likely be inside Rat Hall / Guild Hall, as you all know it as Rat Hall, or it may be in another venue at St. John's, with a short informal program that combines alumni recognition and achievement awards with some updates from St. John's leadership. So it's an opportunity for us to, instead of having 10 or 12 different programs that are all happening simultaneously, have one program and have an informal meal together, but with classes in the same room, but sitting in tables. So that's an option that is being explored by the staff right now. And as we get closer, our staff liaisons will let you know more details about that. Does that help?
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, both from a questionable weather. It also addresses the fact that communication sometimes in the tents has been a little bit iffy from time to time. So I think better microphone setup would probably help.
And thank you, Mike. And quite honestly, the other concern that it addresses is some classes which have sometimes other activities that they want to go and do. So maybe they've gone to a lot of the things on campus, alum college sessions or the beach party, and then they want to go off to St. Joe or something like that. And then they leave 10 classmates left. And so those 10 classmates are in the tent, and we have a tent that fits 50 or 60 or 70 people, and they feel bad. And so by combining that group, we help that critical mass feel bigger, and then it doesn't point out any of those lapses. And in fact, we hope that if the meal is easy to access and right there, by reducing the registration fee, we are actually reducing the price point to access that meal, and hopefully more people stay on campus for that meal as a result as well.
Great. Bill Olson has a question next. Bill?
My question is about the timing of registration. I mentioned when I was speaking that I thought registration would open in March, and Jamie mentioned February. So I think we need to organize that. And Val or Raj, can you guys just speak a little bit to the ability for us as volunteers to register early?
Absolutely, I'm happy to take that question. So for the first 5 years, we actually opened registration on March 1st. And so that's our drop dead registration date. We do have a goal internally, and we're working to adjust our timelines to have built and tested the registration page so that we can open it earlier in February. So you've hot off the press news that staff is working really diligently to build the necessary registration tools and the website that would support that registration process and test it. Many of you will be called on to help us test the form because it is a very complicated registration form. If you can imagine doing programming over 4 different days. We'll need you to help us test it, and hopefully with that testing and that timeline, we can go live on or around February 1st, again, to give people more of an opportunity to get that date preserved in their calendars. As our key and strategic volunteers, whatever timeline we land on, our goal is February 1st. If we need to move that back to the second week in February, simply because we don't have our testing done and our fixes after the tests reveal potential problems, we'll keep that fluid and flexible, and we'll keep you posted about when it actually will open live to the public. Prior to that, about a week to 10 days prior to it going live to the public, you as our volunteers will have the opportunity to register first. And that is a benefit of being a volunteer. So you'll get your pick of the housing for your classes. You'll be able to kind of mobilize your own roommates. So that's a benefit to you for volunteering. But 2, it also will serve to inspire the rest of your classmates. We all like to go where there are people that we know and trust already. So you will be the trusted name on the list that everybody else will kind of be inspired to join by seeing you there. So that's how we anticipate working registration. For sure, registration will be open by March 1st, but we do anticipate working very diligently to have it open earlier than that by February 1st. Does that help clarify? Great.
This is Ken. What have you done to improve the housing for married couples?
So it depends on which campus you're talking about. So there are married couple housing on both campuses. I can really only speak to what's happening at St. Ben's, and that is that there are options for every class year to have married housing in the same building as the single gendered classmates. So the reality is we are a campus for students, and so all of our beds are single beds, and they're squeaky. So and the bedding is light. So We've made arrangements and we try our best to be hospitable, but at the end of the day, it's still a college campus. I don't know if Raj, you want to speak to housing at St. John's.
Happy to do that. Thank you, Val, and thank you, Ken, for the question. Yeah, we do get feedback every year by folks who say, oh, wow, I didn't remember what the college dorms were like until I had to pack up my suitcase and live there. So certainly that will be feedback that you as volunteers will receive from some of your classmates. We know that and anticipate that. Classmates are welcome to bring amenities that they would like to bring with them, like special pillows, fans. It's probably going to be warm the last weekend of June, so bring a fan and shampoo and conditioner that you like and that type of thing. That said, we do try to give our older and more senior alumni and alumni the best housing options on campus, including the air-conditioned apartments and apartments with elevators, or buildings with elevators. Most of our buildings are handicap accessible, but those that aren't go to the youngest classes. So like last year, it was my 10-year reunion. I stayed in Tommy Hall on the 4th floor of Tommy, and it was really dang hot. But luckily, we knew that, and we left the window open all day, so it cooled off the room during the day. And we also weren't spending very much time in there. It was like at the end of the night. Now, that said, I know that there are folks who you're bringing spouses. You want to make sure you have a private bathroom. You want to make sure that your spouse feels comfortable. And so those are things that you can certainly talk to our staff about. If you prefer to call Lila Butch in our office and just have Lila walk you through the housing options, do that, and have your classmates do that as well. There will be some select rooms at the St. John's Abbey Guest House available on a first come, first served basis. And there's about 30 rooms total in the guest house, and Lila is the person to ask for that as well. Does that help? Kind of a non-answer for you, Ken, but hopefully that helps.
Well, it was on our 50th, there was really nothing. They kind of had, we were the first, and so they kind of had forgotten that we brought wives along, I guess, at times, or that wives were going to be there.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think you're right. That was the first year in 2015. We have learned a lot since then. So we do make sure that where we know that, at least at St. John's, where we know that women are also staying in that dorm, we make sure that one of the restrooms is marked as a women's restroom on that floor, like in Bennett Hall, for example. Not every room in Bennett Hall has a restroom inside that apartment, so you have to go down the hall. So we make sure that those are clearly marked. But yeah, like Val said, the beds are all single beds. They always have been and always will be single beds. So you can push 2 beds together. You can bunk one on top of the other in a bunk situation. And there's always hotels too for those who really feel like that would be the best space for them in driving. Our opinion is that people staying on campus is an important part of the reunion experience, but we know that that's just not appropriate for every single guest.
Right. To that end, Raj, Tim Foley, thank you, Tim, for your question in the chat box, asked a question about how housing works for someone bringing their family. At this time, we have not planned a reunion to be a full family affair. Of course, children are welcome, but there is no special programming for children at this point, simply because the 2 staffs are very fully engaged, taking care of the more than 1,600 people who are there already. So there's no special programming for children. Children are welcome, but you will be kind of their primary caretaker, and they may or may not get a little bored. So just be aware of that. Spouses, however, are very welcome, and on average, the last 4 years of reunion, we've had anywhere between 150 to 250 spouses or guests or friends accompany alums who are not Bennies and Johnnies. So there's generally a good crowd of people who don't have the Benny Johnny experience. And of course, in our true Benedictine hospitable fashion, they are most welcome. So I hope, Tim, that answers your questions. Do let us know if not.
Jim Leitner from class of 70. I'm wondering, the question is probably for Raj, will there be an opportunity to hear the Abbey organ expansion?
That's a great question, Jim. I hope so. The organ should be done by Christmas this year, so in a few months. But as you know, organs take a lot of tuning and effort, and there's going to be a whole year's worth of adjustments made. The grand, well, I guess the soft launch concert should be in April of 2020. So you'll probably hear some of that music at the various masses or prayer services through the monastic liturgy of the hours if you attend during the weekend.
Maybe a concert?
A concert is not on the schedule right now, but if you know of an organist who you want to propose that we add to the schedule, your suggestions are most welcome. Okay.
Thanks.
Great. John asked a question as well. Have we noticed any trends over the past few years with Benny Johnny couples in regards to housing preferences and arrangements? I would say that there's not a specifically identified trend, except that more and more of them are showing up for reunion, and that depending on if you share a reunion year or whether you're in different or adjoining reunion years, that seems to determine where people choose their housing preference. So it is a tough choice if you share a reunion year to decide where you want to bunk. So having a Benny and a Johnny in the same class and being married, you get the pick of all the options. So so really the world is your oyster. Any other staff people have anything to add to that?
Valerie, this is Rick. And would you just make a comment relative to the availability of space? I think it's still a great deal available, but is it?
Do you mean space in the residence halls, Rick?
I think Rick froze, but I'm going to step in here. Oh, okay.
Okay,
go ahead.
yeah. So we have worked with our facilities staff to preserve.
I couldn't hear that. I couldn't.
Yeah. Okay. I'm assuming you meant housing, Rick. Is that true?
Correct.
Great. So we have reserved as many available open spaces for the campus on both campuses. We've worked real closely with our housing and events staff so that we have, there's a few summer lodgers who take their lodgings on both campuses, but by and large, we've reserved all of the available beds. There's a few that are taken offline for maintenance every year, but otherwise we do our very best to accommodate. We have not yet sold out completely housing, and we've housed up to 1,400 people at different times. So there's plenty of housing available. However, to get the housing you want for your class, and housing is assigned to a specific area by class, to get within that selection the housing you want, organize and plan early, because
Great.
classes are known to sell out.
A follow-up question. I'm sorry, Raj, follow-up question that my Benny wife asked because she was listening and on the presentation earlier. As it relates to the various activities that are sort of on the two campuses, what did Johnny Benny couples do in those? Do they end up choosing a lot? Is it easy to move back and forth? How does that fly?
I'm going to comment on that, Scott, because I'm a Johnny Benny couple and I had my reunion last summer. So my wife's in 07 and sure her reunion is in 2017. So my reunion was in 2018. I asked her if she wanted to stay with me in Tommy Hall and she said, hell no. So she stayed at, actually we live in St. Joe, but she stayed at our house. But if she would have, we not lived in St. Joe, she would have stayed at St. Ben's. So there is a preference for some couples to stay together and other couples to split up, depending on if you have groups of friends that you want to hang out with and a place that you want to reminisce.
We're from the class of '80, so I suspect that there won't be that many young people, but we're both from the same class. So
Yep.
That was the question she asked. I thought it was a good one to raise.
It is up to you. And if you want to stay in the class of 80 housing at St. John's, like I said earlier, that will be mixed gender, but we'll try to differentiate bathrooms for women who are staying at St. John's. If you want to stay at St. Ben's, so the housing at St. Ben's, Val, correct me if this is incorrect, the housing at St. Ben's is gender specific and class specific. So it's class of 80 bennies living together. And if you decide to stay with her at St. Ben's, then instead of staying with the class of 80, you'll stay in the mixed gender housing at St. Ben's. Is that wrong?
It's a little wrong. Now, wherever the class of 80 is, there is the option to be on a single gendered wing or a mixed gender wing. So, but you'll be with the 80s regardless.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know.
And in terms of activities, that was kind of the other part of the question, was the activities from a couple of slides back. Do they happen at the same time? How do people do that?
Yeah.
The various activities.
Right. Unfortunately, because we're working with the 3-brand identity, there are some times when there's a St. Ben's event and a St. John's event happen simultaneously. And that is where you as a couple will have to make a choice. And we've seen everything. We've seen couples make a choice to attend their school respective events separately. We've also seen a couple attend one or the other with a commitment that the next cycle they'll go back to the other campus. So it really is something that you can kind of talk about and plan for, but it is a choice that you will get to make.
Okay, great, thanks.
What I've found is that other than the Saturday evening dinners that are campus specific for Johnny's and Benny's, everything else is very much, both. You still might have to make a choice between certain events that are going on at St. Ben's and certain events going on at St. John's, but they're not necessarily geared just for Johnny's or just for Benny's. They're just events that happen at the same time. And
thanks, Mike.
Okay, at this time, I think we're going to switch it back over to Rick Speckman, who's going to guide us into our panel discussion. Rick?
Great, and thanks so much to the group for all the comments and the questions. I'm certain there will be more that will be, coming forth. We have 4 people who have experienced reunion, and 2 Bennies, of course, and 2 Johnnies. And, they all have kind of unique experiences and takeaways from this. So we're fortunate to have Brian Kippers from the class of 89, Amber Streff Walling from the class of 04, Brian Kelly from the class of, what class is he, Raj?
99.
99, and he is a former alumni president, did a great job for our group, and Ellen Newkirk from the class of 13. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce himself, herself, class year, and when your reunion was, and kind of what the highlight was of the reunion. And then I'm going to ask some specific questions just based on kind of knowing some of the experience that you had previously. So Brian, why don't we start off with you?
Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is Brian Kippers, class of 1989. And my wife is Shelley Kippers. She's also a class of 89 from St. Ben's. And our reunion was last June, and it was fantastic. I was on the reunion committee and spent a lot of time working with my classmates to plan a great event. So a highlight of the reunion, there's a lot of highlights of the reunion. I was happy when when St. John's, St. Ben's finally got together and put this reunion, both schools together. I think it was something that previous reunions we had talked about, how come the 2 schools aren't together? And of course the alumni were much older than I am. Back in the days when St. Ben's and St. John's were 2 separate educational experiences. They have their reasons for maybe keeping it separate, and people who went to school in the 80s, like I did, when the schools were together, we just thought it was a natural way to do the reunion. But some of the highlights, I stayed on campus in Flinttown with a whole bunch of my classmates, some of my old roommates. We all stayed together. We had a pretty significant turnout from the class of 89. And I think it was just getting back together and not acting like we were in college, but at least trying to act like we were in college again. It's kind of the same old fun stuff we used to do, cruising to St. Joe, going down to the lake, spending time on the tundra. But yeah, there's just a lot of different events. I'm sure people have heard about them already, but it was a great weekend. I spent 2 nights there. I probably could have come up a day earlier and spent another night because a lot of those guys did that. And it was an awful lot of fun. So not any one particular event, but I think all of them were worthwhile. I was just happy the fact that the schools are together and doing this during the summer.
Brian, I've got a question for you. Were you the guy that drove me home at 2 o'clock in the morning from St. Joe?
No comment.
Thank you. Say, there's always kind of interesting stories that come out of the different classes about a classmate. Anything that you could share with us where you know that it was maybe a profound experience from one of your classmates?
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually a very difficult question, and at the same time. I think one of the things that was great for our class is the classmate that we elected and voted on to get the alumni award, which was Brian Olson. And in our class, it was when we talked about this award, it was difficult because the 2 previous award winners of the alumni award, the last one was Mark Vandehei. Mark is an astronaut and spent significant time in the International Space Station. And so he won it 5 years ago. And prior to that was Kyle Levin, who worked for our government and counterterrorism. So those are 2 big, huge, enormous jobs that these guys have had and fantastic careers. And they're both like the nicest guys in the world. And when Brian Olson received his award, he's like, "Geez, I'm not an astronaut. What am I going to speak about?" And we all just encouraged him. The reason you're getting the award is you're just such a quality person, and a guy who really can bring everybody together. He just has that natural ability to draw Bennies and Johnnies together, whether it be on campus, whether it be at football games. He called me last week before the Tommy Johnny game. And he does that all the time. He just randomly calls guys in our class and keeps them together. He's such a great guy, and that's such an awesome skill set to have to kind of keep us together. This has been 30 years since we graduated, so he's just an awesome guy to be able to do that. So I think it was really impactful, not on his life, but all of us too, to kind of to be around him, be friends with him, to know that it does take a little effort to stay in contact with people that you graduated with 30 years ago. Brian's really a great template for the rest of us to follow. So yeah, it was definitely a meaningful weekend for him, but all of us as well who have been friends with his for such a long time.
That's great. I'm having a little bit of internet, whatever it is, deconstitution or something like that. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, good. Another part of this question is there's a unique balance between the reunion experience and, of course, fundraising. How did you guys balance that? And what are some of the things that you did to kind of put those 2 together during reunion?
That one's for me. I'll take that question.
Yeah, please.
Okay, you're right. It is a difficult balance, right? Because we wanted to really reach out to all of our classmates. We took the entire list and divided it up and called everybody multiple times to make sure that we could drive as many people as possible to our reunion. So it was really an outreach program to drive attendance. It wasn't designed to drive a dollars raised or participation. The first thing that was to drive people to go to the school and to enjoy a weekend together. But with that, though, we also tied into all the multiple communications we were giving our classmates about the importance of making sure St. John's and St. Ben's can exist in the modern era. To exist in the modern era in higher education is extremely difficult today. So that's where we did talk about participation. We wanted to get everybody, regardless of the dollar amount, to donate money to the school to show that they they really liked their time at St. John's and St. Ben's, and to kind of give back and show that at least on the reunion years. So we started there, and then we also kind of broke it down where we wanted to get as many fellows to give enough money to St. John's so they could be classified as a fellow. So Doug Yeager handled that one, did a great job with it. And so it was a really nice balance. It was, I'd say, 2/3 really trying to drive attendance to the reunion and keep everybody together, get everybody come back to campus. And then probably 1/3 of the time was tied into softly recommending, hey, go to the school donation page and donate some money, whether it be just for the general fund or whether it be for student scholarships or on St. John's Give Day, any one of those. So we did it, I thought, pretty softly. We heard 0 complaints, which maybe that tells me maybe we didn't do it strong enough. But I think we did a good job of getting people to donate money to the school, and at least getting to think about if they didn't donate money last year, maybe now we're in their mind for in the future, maybe for this next year and for the rest of the years that they want to be attached to the school.
Great. Oh, thank you. And Ellen, are you here?
Yes, hi everybody.
Oh, great. I'm so glad you're with us, and I got to tell you, it's lonely at the top, so I'm glad you're here.
Okay.
It's why don't you talk a little bit about the experience that you guys had at reunion with your classmates and just some things that maybe resonated with you?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2013, so my 5th year reunion was in 2018, so about a year and a half ago. And we worked really well. Well, this was our first reunion ever, so we didn't really have any experience as the separate St. Ben's and St. John's reunions. So that was easy in some ways because we didn't really have anything to compare it to. So our class committees, I think, worked really well together. We had really strong volunteers on both the Benny and Johnny side, and I think that was something that was kind of cool, is that a lot of those people who were on our class committees are still really involved, and I think the experience of us working on reunion together really helped us helped that group. I also work at St. Ben's, so I'm kind of involved already, but helped the other people in our class committee really stay more highly engaged after reunion as well.
Yeah, and Ellen, tell me a little bit about any advice you could give to these volunteers, relative to kind of outreach. And I'm assuming that has to do with connectivity of your classmates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we were kind of lucky in our class committee where our reunion class ambassadors, we were from a lot of different kind of social circles and different groups from our class. So that was kind of helpful in that we just kind of divided and conquered. So on the call nights, kind of like Brian said, we just divided up the list. We didn't really separate it between Benny's only called Benny's and Johnny's only called Johnny's. It was kind of like, who are you closer with? Because that, getting the call from one of your good friends is maybe more meaningful than someone, who happens to be a Benny, but isn't that close to you. And then we had a joint meeting, I think probably around January or February before registration opened, and we kind of made a social media plan. I think that was really helpful. So we just counted out the weeks to reunion, and everybody signed up for a week, and then posted in our class page on Facebook, and then our own personal social medias like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, that kind of thing, to make sure we're hitting all those different social circles, because maybe not everyone is a member of our class page or sees only certain channels. So that was probably the best way that we were able to reach out to the most people.
Great. It's, one of the things that our class did, we were fortunate that we had about 20 people on our committee. And of course, we just had to always have kind of a party around that. But, one of the things that we also identified were kind of these subset pods of groups where we could identify 1 or 2 real influencers within those groups of classmates that maybe some of us even hadn't had a lot of contact with. And by getting to those particular individuals and getting them on board and asking them to do personal messaging to bring friends along and do things like that, tell me kind of what you did in building the attendance that you had.
Yeah, I guess just participating in the call nights. We participated in both of the call nights in the spring. And we didn't actually do as much calling as like email or texting and Facebook messaging. We found that to be really helpful, just because it's a little more targeted, and a lot of people my age don't really answer their phone if they don't know who it is. So we called people if we actually had their contact in our phone. Otherwise, we would text them or send a Facebook message. So I think that was really helpful, and just all of the social media posts and like the personal outreach, I think really helped.
Cool. I remember calling a classmate that I hadn't talked to in 40 years, and his first thing was, "Hey, Rick, are you still alive?" That's probably for the older classes, though, so you don't have to worry about that stuff. It's and any other particular experience or comment you want to make at this point, just about your reunion experience and what happened?
Yeah, I guess I kind of reiterate something that Jamie actually mentioned earlier, that reunion is definitely more, I mean, it's obviously a time to connect with your classmates, but also a time to get your classmates connected back to the institutions, which I think is really important. And I hadn't really thought about that before I started working on the annual giving team, and then also as a class ambassador for my own reunion class, and that, you know, you can have happy hours and get-togethers with your classmates anytime, but this weekend you have access to both campuses like you usually wouldn't, or you really only do every 5 years. So it's just as important to make those connections with your classmates, but also making sure you're helping them connect back to the institution. This afternoon, I was kind of going over these questions with one of my coworkers, and she shared with me the story of an alum that she's worked with who she, I think, was either a 2004 or 2003 grad. And so she's had her 10th reunion already, but back at her 5th reunion, she said she was just kind of just in a hard place and just kind of struggling. Life wasn't really where she thought she was going to be at that time. And she said being back on campus just really kind of helped her reset and like get back in and grounded in the values that she experienced when she was at St. Ben's. And she said that experience was really powerful for her. So obviously I'm sure it was also being with her classmates and all of that, but just remembering that coming back to these campuses is something that is really important.
Oh, it sure is. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask you available now.
I am here.
Oh, fabulous. Folks, meet Brian Kelly. Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself and the alumni experience you've had.
Yeah, I've been involved in this since I graduated, feels like. In the last 6 years leading up to the reunion last summer, was on the alumni board, and kind of was really anticipating this because I've been involved in the transition from homecoming to summer and separate to joint, and had a lot of background and had not actually had a chance to have my reunion yet. So it was a ton of fun. We had a really nice group from our class, a lot of excitement, and the ability to slow down, spend time, enjoy campus, and have people that you haven't seen for a long time, and especially out of town people that were able to come back. That was a whole weekend. I think is a huge opportunity to stay connected to folks.
And, you know, I had mentioned the group before, but just so you all know, is that Brian is a past president of the alumni board. In 2080, we're going to build a library for him. And we don't know where the library is going to be, and we don't know if it'll have any books in it at that time, because it'll all be digital stuff. So we're working on that concept. But Brian, tell me a little bit about how your class organized and what you did and what kind of a turnout you had.
We had, I think, a really strong turnout. I would say it'd be really important to obviously get in touch with people early and encourage them to register. But we had a lot of people that just showed up, especially on Saturday. They may not have registered. They may have just come to campus. They may have just made it for a few hours even. But I think we ended up with probably 150 plus people between St. John's and St. Ben's at some point on the weekend. And at one point, there was a group of, I would call it 75 people in front of the Earth homes, Johnny's and Benny's mixed. Like, people just rolled in with coolers and like started mixing drinks and having a beer and hanging out for a couple hours. We had to like drag people up to the dinner to do our award and that sort of thing. But it was that kind of informal time was really, really valuable. And, you know, there's just a lot of excitement. And I know Raj asked me to touch on this story, but I have a friend that ended up coming to reunion We did phone calls. I don't think we were very good at attending the call nights, but we did take names and divide them up. And a couple weeks before reunion, I called a friend of mine in Chicago that I hadn't seen in 13 years probably. I left him a message. The Monday of reunion, I get a message in my office voicemail Monday morning that he said, "Hey, I'm coming to campus for reunion. I don't really know where I'm going to stay or how I did this, but I just booked a flight." So I called him back, got a hold of him. I said, "We'll figure out the living situation. That's not a big deal. We can get you a spot to stay." And he's like, "Okay, I'm renting a car," and I forget how to get up there. I'm like, no, you're not renting a car. I'm going to come pick you up. I'm taking Friday off anyway. Coming in at 9 or 10 in the morning, hung out for a little bit and headed up to campus. And he, as we drove onto campus, he like looked around and said, "Man, this is going to be awesome." And then we got into the Earth Homes and we hooked up with some other guys, and everybody looks around like, "This is so great." Like, we're back on campus. Kind of like Brian said before, it's like we weren't really trying to be like we're in college. It was kind of like being back in college for a weekend, and just those connections and opportunity. And I think one of the powerful things is just the outreach, and even just making a call, leaving a message, sending a text message to somebody that you maybe were close with or hung out with but haven't seen in a long time, can really spur them to make it back to reunion and make the experience so much better because you get so many people involved.
Yeah, and as far as your kind of volunteer group, Brian, how many were involved as, kind of as the committee for this thing?
We probably had, I bet it was like 8 to 10. Our group wasn't very big. We've always had a really good class. There's another one of our classmates was the president of the Alumni Association 2 years before me, so he and I were trying to kind of bow out of too much responsibility because we've been burnt out a little bit. But the other guys stepped up, and we just get the. I don't really. It's kind of one of those things you don't know how it happens, but the word gets out, and if you can get from one person to the next, it can really snowball.
Yeah, and one thing I know that you can speak to because of your previous experience as the alumni board chair is the organization of the alumni office to make this easy for the volunteers to really execute their communications and things. Can you speak just a little bit about that support?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to just have a committee and follow the script, basically, they have, I don't know where you guys have talked about so far, but they have a postcard that's the directory cover, I believe, if we're still using that model. They can go out early. They've got mailings that can go out. They've got drafted letters. The weekend is basically planned. Like, it's not like you have to think about where things are going to be or where you're going to have dinner or any of that stuff. And so really your focus for the committee can be on connecting with classmates, reaching out to people you haven't seen in a while, getting them to come to campus. That's the first big deal, is just get them connected. Raj and I worked for a number of years in the fundraising piece, and we figured our volunteer strategy should be getting more and more people in touch with St. John's and St. Ben's. And the more they are connected, when that phone call or letter comes to give, it'll become more natural, and we'll kind of soften the beachhead, if you will. But get people to connect, get people to come, get people to experience a fun time. And then, if you can build something around the giving side and get some excitement with the reunion, that's a big deal as well.
Good points. Engagement and experience are, build retention. Retention literally builds the infrastructure of support for the whole university, which is just fabulous. Tell me about, for your committee, did you guys meet a few times leading up to the reunion itself, and where did you meet?
Our class, so we're 20 years out. So the last, if we go back 5 years and then we go this time, we're kind of in the stage of, kids and activities and that sort of thing. So we have done, 8:30, 9 p.m. virtual meetings kind of like this. And we usually start with a, what's your drink of choice tonight is the kickoff to that call. And then we go on about our stuff and, whether we're looking at events or phone call lists or whatever it is.
Oh, cool. And I've got to tell you, if you can see me, I've hoisted a very nice glass of Chardonnay in honor of summer. And if we were all together, we'd be toasting each other. But the fact that my wife says that I'm on video, it's okay for me to drink alone. But of course, I have a dog too, so we don't have to worry about that.
Rick, you're not drinking alone. You're not drinking alone.
Oh, God bless you, man. From the audience, relative to some of our panelists here, about their experiences and how they got things done. And I have a question.
I have a question for Brian Kippers.
Yes.
This is Pete Allen, class of 90. How you doing, BK?
Hey, great. How you doing?
Great. The class of 89 had a fantastic turnout for its reunion, and you pretty much described how you got there. But in addition to all the phone calls you made, were there any other things you guys did in the months leading up to the reunion that really got people excited?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we did a couple different events, social events, trying to, make sure people had opportunities to get together and kind of build momentum going into the reunion. So we got together, one time we got together at my house. So I have a speakeasy in my basement. So we hosted a little party down there. I mixed a pretty good Manhattan. So we had people over for that. Met at a couple different bars on different nights, just trying to, again, get the momentum going, get people fired up about it. And then it's not so, weirdly awkward. You show up on campus, you haven't seen people in 5 years or longer. Some of these people I hadn't seen literally since I graduated. You're seeing them, prior to it, and then it leads into the big day. Plus, it's a great way to share different ideas of how to, drive more adoption. People that might have been forgotten about, how to reach out to them. Sometimes you'll call people and you'll email them, you won't hear anything back, and then you try to kind of break it down into your different friend groups, trying to figure out, who knows this guy or who knows that guy. So getting together often, I think, was one of the key successes to having a great reunion.
How about other questions? Okay, one thing I'll mention is that our class committee did a variety of different types of get-togethers, and we would space them out about every 3 months or so, and it just builds such great kind of camaraderie, which we already had from the group, but it built something special, and particularly as we made contacts on the phone with our classmates. I mean, you could just see the energy building on this, and back in our, believe it or not, 35th, 40th, and even 45th reunion, we had huge turnouts, and it meant so much to so many people. So I think what we're going to do, if we have no other comments from anybody, I'm going to thank the two Brians and Amber, not Amber, but Ellen. Amber, sorry, of course. Thanks so much, guys, and great job and great to have you here. So I'm going to turn it back to somebody else.
That's me. Hey, Rick, I would like to make one comment before we kind of move on in the agenda, which is my experience, and it echoes, I think, what all of the participants were saying, is that my reunion experience in the summer of 2016 was absolutely enhanced by being involved on the committee and reconnecting with the guys and the gals of my class well in advance of that summer, so that when we came together in June, that was that was kind of the culmination of celebrating our hard work, but also yet another touch point. And there's just so much reward in getting there when you participate and when you've collaborated with your classmates for months in advance. So thanks to everyone who's participating on this and who's stepping up to be a part of that.
Great comments, Bill. Thanks so much. Okay, who's our lead on the next part?
I think that's me. So I'm just going to continue here, and I'm going to talk about giving and offer some comments on giving. And first, I'd like to talk about the donor recognition on name tags. So for those of you who remember, when you arrive on campus for reunion, you receive a name tag, and that name tag, if you're part of the Cool Kids Club, contains the red dot below your name. And if you're really cool, you might actually have 2 red dots on your name tag, which signifies that you're a donor to either St. John's or St. Ben's. And having sat at the registration table this summer, there were a lot of people I recognized who had the 2 dots. And trust me, you want to have a red dot. That's really that's cool. So how do you get one? Well, it's easy. All you have to do is make a make a gift to St. Ben's or to St. John's during the fiscal year, which is now through reunion time. And the research says that it's way more fun to attend reunion as an alum who is a donor, because not only do you get the red dot, but empirically you already have existing buy-in to St. Ben's and to St. John's. And as a donor, you enjoy and commit to reunion more deeply. I'd like to talk a little bit about why I give, and then Jamie will as well. But for those of you who know me well, the fact of the matter is I probably could talk for an hour or two about my St. John's experience and why I give. But what I've decided to do is kind of give a top 10 list of reasons why I give. So without further ado on that, and in order to keep it relatively brief, I'll start with number 10, which is 98% of current students receive scholarships supported by the Student Fund. Number 9, as the middle child of 7 kids, there's no way my parents were in a financial position to afford me the kind of opportunity I had at St. John's. But it happened, and it was because of the Student Fund. Number 8, I believe the single gender residential experience at St. John's and St. Ben's is absolutely part of the secret sauce, and I will do everything I can to support the continuation of that. Number 7, St. Ben's and St. John's are a match made in heaven. My wife's a 91 Benny, and I love St. Ben's almost as much as I love St. John's. Number 6, I gotta tell you, I was gonna say Tommy's suck for number 6, but I'll scratch that and I'll say I entered St. John's as a boy and I graduated from St. John's as a man. Number 5, St. John's and St. Ben's are the best places to make the deepest lifelong friendships anyone can imagine. Number 4, the alumni networks are second to none, and today's young men and women are our future, and I support them. Number 3, St. John's reach is global, and it's continuing to expand. Number 2, it feels good to share and pay my financial treasure forward, and I know by giving, I'm making a difference. And number 1, the world needs more Johnnies. Jamie, you want to speak for a moment on why you give?
Wow, that is hard to follow. My giving message is really different, and I can see why they wanted you to share, and they wanted me to share as well. So I remember when I graduated getting a call about giving, and my initial thought was, no, I have a ton of debt. I'll maybe reach back out when my debt's gone. Thanks, you know. And that was kind of my initial thought. And so life went on, and as it does for everybody, and I just got further and further away from college. And you know, yes, I gave here and there to other places in my life, but as the years went by, I was introduced to the alum board, and it really didn't even know what the alum board did or why it existed. And I don't know if I lived under a rock. Maybe all of you knew all of this, but I got turned on to just getting connected back to St. Ben's and back to my roots, back to where I came from, and learned about giving and learned about where a scholarship that I had the opportunity to get was from, and that all the giving goes to scholarships. I didn't know. So again, whether it be just ignorance, naivety, I don't know what it was. I just had no clue. Lack of awareness, which I think is, you know, maybe was out there. I know it's changing. This is just my story, so it is what it is. And so just getting connected back to St. Ben's just really, truly inspired me to go, wow, you know, it was such a wonderful experience reflecting back, looking at my life now and the values and the things that the foundation that it helped build for my life, saying I want to give back, and every dollar counts, and it doesn't matter the amount, but every dollar counts. And so just being able to be a part of the alum board and deciding, you know, yes, I want to give back, understanding where those dollars are going. It makes me proud. It makes me proud to give, and it makes me proud to talk about it and to share with others, like, hey, I'm giving, are you giving? And it just, and making that conversation okay, and making it a natural part of connecting with other folks that you graduate with. And really coming from a standpoint of, I didn't even know this. My gosh, you know, all the dollars, you know, go to other girls or other guys to get them to college, and that's awesome. Like, you know, whether it be $5 or whether it be $1,000, every dollar counts, and you can do it too. So that is my giving message. Again, it's not, I mean, you gave so many great points, Bill, and I guess I came from just a completely different perspective, but I think that there are people out there that feel the same way I do, because I ran into them. And I actually talked to a recent grad last year from St. John's, and he was in the same exact boat that I was in. And that was, you know, how many years ago? So that I graduated. So I know that the situation is out there. And I just think that we need to change our perception of giving. And obviously, being on the Resource Development Committee now, that's just my passion. So that's why I give story. Thanks, Bill.
Jamie, that's great, and it's a good point. Everybody's story is their own, and that's maybe kind of a good segue to talk about how to ask for you know, a gift. The important thing is we all have our own story, and sharing that story with, you know, the person you're approaching is important. And then also being an active listener to what that person's story happens to be. And through that active listening, capturing that information, using it in that conversation, and then really you know, using a join me approach rather than a cold ask when you approach someone and ask them to participate. And I always like to say, hey, join me and participate. And really, there's a lot of research that suggests that when you ask, the focus is on participation, not the dollar amount, right? So that's very important. But I love that we have different approaches and different stories, and we own them, and they're ours, and everybody else has their own version of it. So being a great active listener is important. All right, we are going to attempt to do a role play. This will be kind of interesting. Jamie and I are without practice on this with one another, so we're gonna see how this goes. So this is kind of an approach. Let me preface it by saying here, let me get my thoughts here organized a bit. St. Ben's and St. John's, they will provide us a list and tools to identify classmates that we individually want to target for our outreach. And as was noted earlier, St. Ben's and St. John's, they handle giving data separately. So you'll get the alumni contact information from, you know, through your respective mechanism that shares that. And it's going to be very different if you're a Benny versus a Johnny. But there's many ways you can perform your outreach. And it could be a phone call, it could be an email, it could be a text message, could be in person, whatever it happens to be. But we're gonna attempt to do a brief role play here on what a phone call might sound like. Okay, so I'm gonna dial up Mike, who was one of my buddies. We'll do and Jamie, you're gonna be Mike, right?
Yep.
Right. So ring ring.
Hey, this is Mike.
Hey Mike, it's Bill Olson, your Mary One next door neighbor from St. John's freshman year. How are you doing?
Hey Bill, I've been good. How are you? It's been a while. Yeah,
I'm doing great, thanks. Haven't seen you for, I guess it's been almost 5 years. Well, maybe since our last reunion. And as a matter of fact, that's the reason why I'm reaching out to you, is that reunion is coming up, and I can hardly believe it. Actually, this coming June, the 26th to 28th, will be a great weekend for our class to get back to campus and spend some time together at the colleges that we love. And I'm working with some other classmates on getting as many of us from 91 there as we can, whatever your respective year is. Will you plan to attend?
You know, yeah, I think I was planning to attend. I mean, I looked at those dates, and I mean, the dates seem pretty open. So yeah, I would love to reconnect and get back up there.
Like, that's great. You know what? Registration opens in early March, and I can send you a link to register online for the event once it's available. Would you prefer an email or a text message?
Text message would be great. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Hey, that's super. Mike, you know what? Another goal we're working on for the class is to get as many donors to support scholarships as possible. And I'm proudly supporting scholarships for our reunion. Because St. John's is one of the best gifts I ever received, I want to share it with today's young guys. Can I count on you to make a gift and join me in making that gift?
Yeah, of course. Why not?
Hey, that's super. I really appreciate that. Every gift, regardless of the amount, makes a difference. I can send you a link. Would you prefer me to do that in an email or text?
Go ahead and email me that one.
That's super. I'll tell you what, I will send that off to you. I appreciate that. Thanks so much. And I can't wait to see you in June. Have a good night, Mike.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bill.
Take care. So that's, you know, these role plays sometimes seem a little silly, but here's the thing, is that you do that sort of thing once, and the second time, and the third time, and the fifth time, and the 10th time, it's so much easier. And I'm telling you that when somebody picks up that phone, they don't immediately recognize your voice, and you kind of make that connection with them. It's wonderfully fulfilling. And the challenge will be for you all, I think, to keep that sort of conversation to the 3, 4, 5 minutes rather than the 30, 40, 50 minutes, because there's lots of outreach to do, right? You know, if that sort of call goes a little bit different and Mike says, hey, you know what, I won't be able to join. I might say, hey, you know what, to help us with future planning, would you be willing to share with us the reason why you're not able to attend, and then kind of collect that feedback? And if it, if there's something of substance there, share it on with my staff person. Or if when I make the ask for him to join me in giving, you might echo something like along the lines of saying, hey, you know what, I hear that and I understand how you can feel, but remember, every gift, regardless of the size, counts towards our donor participation goal, and they really add up. My experience has been very few guys are offended if you just qualify that. Sometimes guys think, hey, you know what, I can't give 100 or 200 or a big number, and therefore it's just easier for me to say no. And I think the point there is we don't want to pressure, but we want to let people know that participation comes in every size and shape, right? That if someone can't give a gift that's of a more substantial size, that they are a full and equal participation for giving a $10 or $25 or $50 gift as well. And so that's important. If you connect via email, right, it might go something like this. Let's see how this plays out. All right. I'm typing here. That's what this is. Hey, Mike, it's our reunion year, and hope to see you at reunion June 26th to 28th. In addition, I give to St. John's because I'm grateful for the scholarships I received, and I want to pay it forward. Remember, gifts of every size and amount count towards our donor participation, and they really add up, especially when they're matched. Can we count on you? Join me in giving a gift of any size at www.givesju, or if I'm writing this for St. Ben's, give CSB, www.givecsb.com. Okay. Thank you, and hope to see you soon. Bill Olson, class gift volunteer, right? Pretty simple. The point is that it's a matter of action. Our intentions are great, but if we don't act on them, then it's all for naught. Text is also a very common way to do that, and that's maybe simple and maybe a little less formal, and for those that you have a connection with already, maybe the right and easiest route out to go. And it could be just as simple as saying, hey, Mike, save the date for our reunion on June 26th to 28th. And remember, our class gift of scholarships will be a great way to support future students. Would you consider tossing something in to help the reunion scholarship goals? It'd be great to have you on board. Thanks. All right, so that's kind of just some ideas to think about. The important thing is use your own voice. When you have a chance, be an active listener and use that in making your join me message. All right, with that, I will turn back to, I think, Jamie and Raj as they talk a little bit about Basecamp.
Hey, this is Rick again. Can I interrupt for just a minute, guys?
Of course.
Thank you. If you hadn't said of course, I'd really be lost right now. I just want to remind everybody that, you know, we're trying to accomplish a lot of things on this particular call, but the most important thing of all is the turnout at the reunion, to get your group to come together and re-experience, you know, St. Ben's and St. John's, and to have that, because I absolutely believe is that, once again, when people are engaged, they have a wonderful experience, they certainly are going to give. I love the idea of having kind of a reunion, kind of a goal, but don't let that get in the way. Once again, most important thing is to get everybody that we can up on campus. That's so critical, because the rest will follow, believe me.
All right, thanks, Rick. So up next, we wanted to talk a little bit about Basecamp. I know some of you may be familiar with what Basecamp is, and we're actually going to be using Basecamp 2. And this is a web-based project management system that's going to help all the volunteers communicate and manage projects together. So it's really just a shared space where we can all save our information and the decisions that we're making. It's a tool used to help us manage our classwork in a way that's user-friendly. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it, but we're going to watch a quick video that'll kind of give a high level of what the capabilities are. And then we can kind of walk through, I think Raj or Val is going to help walk through one of the class of 1989 site at a high level.
Welcome to Basecamp. Basecamp is a place for you to keep all the work and discussions that go into completing projects. No more long, unnecessary meetings or unwieldy email chains. All your discussions, tasks, files, and important dates regarding that project are in Basecamp and can be accessed anytime by anyone else on the project. The discussion section of your project is where you can post updates, upload files, and give feedback on the work. When posting a new message or commenting on an existing thread, you can also decide who you would like to notify about the update. Everyone with access to the thread can still log in and see what you've written, but only those who you've chosen to notify will get an email alerting them to your message. These email notifications are super handy. Not only are they a great way to stay up to date on the project, but anytime you get notified of a change like a new message or file, you can reply directly to that email and your response will automatically be added to Basecamp. You don't even need to log in. Basecamp is also a great place to share files. You can attach files to a discussion or upload them on their own just by dragging them from your desktop. Once you post a file, people can then add any comments they wish. New versions of files can also be added to the thread. Clicking on a file icon or thumbnail will let you preview and download it if you wish. Well, that's the basics. For more detailed guides and tutorials, come visit us at basecamp.com/help.
All right, thank you, Jamie, for that introduction. I want to walk you through the class of '89. So this is the class that Brian Kippers was a part of. Is a part of. He's still a part of class of '89, turns out. But this is the site that they used last year for their reunion, 30th reunion. And so I'm just going to walk you through what this looks like in practice, a real live Basecamp site. There were 19 members on this project. You can see who they are. So there's Brian Kippers, there's Brian Olson, Bill Olson was helping them. The names of all the Bennies and Johnny volunteers are all there, so you can see who's on the site. In the actual site, the main area is the discussions, and you can see they had 14 different discussions that they're going. You can choose how you want to run this, if you want to have one continuous discussion, or when you post a new message, just post them on that. I'm going to walk into this one that Sarah Abraham Murnane posted on August 1st of 2018. She says, "Hi everyone, I just posted a draft of your postcard. Please let me," oh sorry, Maggie Uch said, "Please, everyone, I posted a draft of your postcard. Please let me know if you see any errors. Once we get the green light, we will print them. Thanks, Maggie." And Sarah was able to say, everything looks great. Sorry, I guess it goes in descending order from the top. Brian Kippers looks good. Chris Manning looks great. Sarah, everything looks great. It won't be able to be there, but thanks for hosting. So here's where you can see what they post. And if you wanted to type a comment, "Hi all," you can say that comment. And right here, you can actually change who gets the comment via email. So if I only want to send a note just to Brian, Bill, and Brian, I can just select them. Or if I want to send it just to the Johnnies, the Bennies will still see this note if they go into Basecamp, but it won't send them an email notification about it, okay? The other thing I want to show is, if I go back to the Basecamp site, the to-dos, you can assign to-do lists or assign checklists to people, so they have upload the worksheets, follow the Facebook group, make sure you're following the Facebook group. They really wanted to focus on this Facebook group and check off boxes here. You can assign those to individual people. And the third thing I want to point out are the files. So you can upload files to be shared. So here's an example of a worksheet that they worked on at a meeting, and they took a picture of the worksheet and uploaded it into the site so anybody else can see the notes that they agreed to. And the beauty of Basecamp is that if you join the committee late, you can still catch up because you can see what other people have posted in the past. Okay. All volunteers will receive a link to the Basecamp from your staff liaison this week in your email. And once you get the link, please take a moment to go into your email and find that Basecamp invitation and set up and log into Basecamp. And from there, we will use Basecamp for all communications. So please know that that's the way we're going to communicate, is through these discussions. And that's going to help you keep track of all the discussions and decisions, onboard new people as they join your committee throughout the year. Thanks, Jamie.
All right. I think, is there anything else on Basecamp?
No, we're good. Thanks, Bill.
All right, super. We're nearing our time, but I want to speak a little bit about the ongoing class committee meetings. And so now that everybody's fully trained, right, going forward, you'll want to schedule work time with your class committees, okay? And we encourage you to consider regular touch points, actually getting them on your calendar, and so that you're not kind of behind the eight ball. And perhaps maybe early on that's once a quarter, maybe that's once a month, and then even perhaps in the spring you decide that maybe bi-weekly meetings make more sense as it's getting closer. You can meet in person, of course, or you can use Zoom for video conferencing. You can connect with your staff person and get some options for that video conferencing, or you can do a traditional conference call with your class meetings. We encourage you to invite all Benny reunion class ambassadors as well as Johnny class volunteers to all of the meetings so that the conversations are inclusive. All right, so specifically, how will you reach out to your class and drive attendance to reunion for 2020? Well, as was just mentioned a moment ago, included in Basecamp is a toolkit, and it includes a worksheet which will help you identify some next steps that you need to put in place, okay? A staff member from each college or from the alumni board, who's a class coach, is assigned to assist you. And as decisions are made, take notes, upload or update that worksheet on the Basecamp site. And that way, anytime someone logs into Basecamp, they'll be brought up to speed, okay? As you work with your classmates, encourage others to join you as a volunteer. And as decisions are, as the decisions are made, Basecamp really is that is your place and to update others. Remember, not all volunteers were able to attend this meeting, and frankly, not everyone will be able to attend each of your class meetings going forward. So using that to capture some notes to share around is important. And please keep that in mind as you have subsequent meetings and the discussions evolve in the coming months, okay? Let's see here. You wanna make sure that you look for and talk up the Save the Date postcard that's coming soon. All right. When you get together with your class committee, you want to work towards driving what your reunion attendance goals are. You want to determine who else you can involve, and it's helpful to be informative with your staff liaison as well, okay? One mechanism to help with driving the attendance as well as your class volunteerism is also the early call nights and the pre-scheduled call nights. There will be some, I think historically there's been some that have been arranged through IA, but there's nothing prohibiting you from organizing within your class and having your own class-specific call nights, okay? Remember, those postcards will be coming out. You can leverage mass emails and those call nights to drive towards your attendance goals, but be clear about what your specific class messaging will be and make sure that's inclusive and joint between St. Ben's and St. John's. All right, and lastly, and maybe not least, it's important to determine who your signatory on any sort of class meetings happen to be, okay? Dates for the reunion call nights will be announced soon, so there'll be more information coming forward on that. Any questions before I turn it over to Jamie for final thoughts? Okay. Jamie, you get the last word here.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So yeah, just a thought on tonight. I mean, one, I hope all of you guys found this helpful. You know, there was a lot of good ideas that were shared. There's a lot of great resources at your disposal, a lot of supportive folks who want to help make this a success. So thank you again for your time. And staff and lead volunteers are going to be in touch to schedule the class committee meetings, so stay tuned for that. And just most of all, thank you. Thank you again for your time. We hope that you feel that this was valuable, and we just look forward to a successful reunion. Raj and Val, any closing thoughts?
One closing thought from me, and that is that I know most of our staff liaisons are on the phone. So if one by one, each of you staff liaisons would please introduce yourself and let us know which classes you're working with so that anyone who needs to find you is able to do so.
Would you like me to start?
I'll start. I'm Raj Saflikar, working with the St. John's class of 1960 and 1965, and with the St. John's and St. Ben's class of 2015.
Hi, my name is, was anyone else going to go? No? All right. My name is Abby Hansen, class of 2012. I'm an engagement officer at St. Ben's, and I will be working with the classes of 75, 80, and 85. And you all should have received an email from me, and if you haven't, I will reach out again.
Hi, I'm Lisa Miller, and I'm the Alumni Relations Associate for St. Ben's, and I will be working with the classes of 60, 65, and 70.
Hey, Cody Lynch here. I'm the Assistant Director of Annual Giving at St. John's, and I'll be working with, I'm mathematically challenged, but 2010, 2005, 2000, 1995, and 1990. You guys are all 5-year reunions in my heart.
All right, I'm, as I said before, Ellen Newkirk. I'm 2013 grad and I work in annual giving at St. Ben's, and I'll be working with the St. Ben's and St. John's classes of 2015, 2010, and 2005. And if there are any 2005 Johnnies on the call, we are still looking for some 05 Bennies to join the committee. So if you have any suggestions, please send them my way. Thanks.
I'm trying, Ellen. I'm trying really hard.
I know, thank you.
I'll go next. I'm Maggie Weber-Utsch, class of 2000, and I'm the Director of Annual Giving at St. Ben's. And I will be working with the classes of 90, 95, and 2000.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ted Kane. I'm the Associate Director of Annual Giving at St. John's, and I'm the staff liaison for 1970, 1975, 1980, and 1985. Looking forward to working with you all.
Great. Thanks all for those introductions.
All right, thank you, everyone. Our time is wrapped up, so we are ending it just a little bit early here, but we thank you again. We will be sending out this recording to you shortly. We'll post that on your Basecamp site so that it's the first piece of valuable content you can find there, and that you can refer to this later for questions you might have about reunion, the volunteer experience, the fundraising conversations, or the staff liaison support. Thank you again. We appreciate all of your time tonight. Go Bennies and go Johnnies. Take care.